Selected parts from the book One Life is Not Enough. Part 33. In the December 1984 Lok Sabha elections, the Congress party won by an astounding margin. No one, not even the most optimistic congressman, had expected the final tally to be 413 out of 543 seats. Rajiv had achieved what his grandfather and mother had not. The Bharatiya Janata Party managed only two seats in that election, won by Atal Bihari Vajpayee and Lal Krishna Advani. Euphoria was not confined to the Congress, the nation too rejoiced. A young leader had led from the front. He came as a breath of fresh air and offered an audacious vision. He made the nation conscious of the 21st century, which was just 16 years away. The atmosphere radiated a mood of confidence and exultation. It may not have been a new dawn, but the darkness had receded. The sympathy wave had had a powerful impact on the hearts and minds of the voters. I, too, had won from my constituency, Bharatpur, by a big margin. As a first term member of parliament, I did not think I would be included in the Council of Ministers. While I was having lunch at the Ashoka Hotel in Delhi with Sunil Dutt, a close friend and also a first time MP, the hotel manager came up to me and said, "Sir, the Prime Minister wishes to speak to you." I was surprised as I had met him only the previous evening. What could have happened since then? "What are you doing at 5 pm?" asked PM. "Nothing," I replied. "Be at Rashtrapati Bhavan at 5 pm sharp." "I will, but what are you giving me?" "You will know when you get there." He hung up. I told Sunil Bhai about the call and he was delighted. He was certain that I would get a ministerial berth. My wife and I arrived at the Ashoka Hall in Rashtrapati Bhavan a few minutes before 5 pm. I was escorted to the chairs reserved for those who were to be sworn in. I was to be a Minister of State. President Gnani Jail Singh administered the oath of secrecy and my pulse quickened as I signed the register. But the mystery of my portfolio remained. As the high tea after swearing in, I learned that I was to be Minister of State for Steel. I had, for obvious reasons, ruled out external affairs. I had hoped to be Minister of State in the Home, Information and Broadcasting or Defense Ministries. The next morning, the Prime Minister met the Ministers of State in the conference room in South Block. He spoke in general terms. All eyes were on Arun Nehru and Arun Singh, Rajiv Gandhi's close confidants. Both had come from the corporate sector. They wielded much power, exceeded their authority, and used their influence with thoughtless rigor without care or caution. Both controlled access to the Prime Minister. Their administrative experience was nil. They were purblind to the complexities and intricacies of governance. I gradually became familiar with the production and politics of steel. I visited all the steel plants in India, getting to know an aspect of the country about which I had no previous knowledge. It did not take long for me to learn that the production of steel depends on the politics of steel. Each plant had several powerful trade unions. The CPI ran one group, the Congress another, the CPIM yet another. Discipline was abysmal, punctuality was a casualty. The steel mafia was more than a nuisance. One exception was the Tata plant at Jamshedpur. There, Rusi Modi allowed no trade union activity. That made all the difference. At the time, our annual steel production was far below that of South Korea, China, the US, the UK, Russia, and Japan. Each steel plant cost thousands of crores to set up and employed hundreds, including top class engineers. What was missing was work ethic. The mafia and union leaders were constantly in touch with chief ministers who indulged them as they needed their votes. The chief minister of Andhra Pradesh, N.T. Ramarao, kept a keen eye on the steel plant at Vizag. A film actor turned politician, his following was in millions. A spellbinding orator in Telugu with a booming voice, he was a formidable person. The Congress party had denied him a Rajya Sabha seat. Ramarao had then launched the Telugu Desam party, which swept the assembly polls. He once invited me to lunch at his Hyderabad house. His appetite was gargantuan. I counted 14 food items on my thali. My chief purpose at the lunch was to discuss the problems of Vizag steel plant. The chief minister was well briefed and assured me that certain local difficulties in the plant would be remedied. His concern was larger. He asked that the people of Andhra be given preference over non Andhrites for employment as the plant was located in Andhra. I reminded him that the plant had been entirely funded by the central government. Employment was open to all Indians, but appointments would be on merit. In deserving cases, preference could be given to Andhrites, but only as an exception. I dug my heels. He relented with an actor's grace. The chief minister was a natural showman. He gave me a grand tour of his sprawling residence. It was a combination of a film studio and a well stocked museum. We parted on a friendly note. As a minister, I had a personal monthly quota of 1 million tons of steel, which I could allot to whom I pleased. This I surrendered. If I remember right, I set up a committee for disbursing it. With this, I went up in the esteem of the officials. The ubiquitous lobby of steel magnates too concluded that I was no pushover. The first 3 months gave some indication of the functioning of the Rajiv Gandhi government. VP Singh as finance minister was the favorite. In cabinet meetings, he sat to the right of the Prime Minister while P.V. Narasimha Rao sat on his left. Ministers of state were at a loose end. Their cabinet ministers kept them at arm's length and sent no important files to them. The cabinet minister for steel, Vasant Sathe, was a decent man. He was not narrow minded or stickler for rules and regulations. He gave me a free hand. My heart, however, was not in steel. It was in the Ministry of External Affairs. I was delighted when, on 11th March 1985, Rajiv Gandhi asked me to accompany him to Moscow for the funeral of Konstantin Ustinovich Chernenko, General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. The Prime Minister's delegation included P.V. Narasimha Rao, P. Shivashankar, who was the head of the Foreign Affairs Department of the All India Congress Committee, the Venerable G. Parthasarathi and Ramesh Bhandari. We flew in a Boeing 747 plane, the interior of which had been remodeled to provide the PM with a bedroom, a bathroom, and a conference room. The great hall in the Kremlin, where the reception was held, is the last word in grandeur and splendor. The Tsars had been forgotten, but not their wonderful buildings, palaces, churches, and monasteries. The Prime Minister introduced us to the new General Secretary with whom he had a brief meeting. He also met Margaret Thatcher, Zia-ul Haq, several European and Asian leaders. This was his maiden foreign trip as a Prime Minister. On our return to Delhi, I resumed my desultory duties. I was getting no job satisfaction. In the middle of the year, I was appointed Minister of State for Fertilizers. If steel was a bore, fertilizers were even worse. The wax made merry. Natwar is now Minister for Cow Dung. One time, I was shown a bag full of a white substance which I thought was sugar. The secretary of the department looked at me with a mixture of dismay and mild disdain. It was a bag full of fertilizer. Rescue, unknown to me, was waiting in the wings. This was one of those windfalls which ought to be always remembered. The Ministry of Fertilizers is as far from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as chalk is from the cheese. Yet, Rajiv Gandhi told me that he would include me in his delegation to the Commonwealth Summit to be held in October in Nassau, the capital of the Bahamas. He asked me to immediately proceed to Nassau to see if we could help the tiny Caribbean island in any way. I first stopped in New York. I asked our permanent representative to the United Nations to get in touch with the ambassador of Bahamas and ask him to arrange my meeting with the Prime Minister Sir Lyndon Oscar Pindling. I waited for a couple of days, but the Bahamas delegation did not respond. I left for Washington to try my luck there. We did not have an embassy in the Bahamas. The ambassador in Washington, Pratap Kaul, contacted his counterpart in the Bahamas embassy requesting him to arrange my meeting with his Prime Minister. In Washington, too, I fared no better. It became clear that The diplomats from the Bahamas were a hard to find tribe. After 3 wasted days, I decided to return to New York. Just then, the ambassador informed me that the holy man Chandraswamy wished to speak to me. How in the name of heaven did the Swami get to know of my presence in Washington DC? When I took the call, the Swami was chuckling. कुंवर साहब, पिंडलिंग से मीटिंग नहीं हो रहा है क्या? कुंवर साहब, are you not able to meet Pindling? How do you know? I asked, a little irritated. He ignored my question. मैं आपकी मीटिंग का इंतज़ाम कर दिया है. पिंडलिंग आपसे कल मिलेंगे. I have arranged your meeting. Pindling will meet you tomorrow. Where diplomats had failed, the Swami had succeeded. Thank you for listening. All eyes were on Arun Nehru and Arun Singh, Rajiv Gandhi's close confidants. Both had come from the corporate sector. They wielded much power, exceeded their authority, and used their influence with thoughtless rigor, without care or caution. Both controlled access to the Prime Minister. Their administrative experience was nil. They were purblind to the complexities and intricacies of governance. Purblind, P-U-R-B-L-I-N-D. Purblind means having defective vision. It did not take long for me to learn that the production of steel depended on the politics of steel. Discipline was abysmal, punctuality was a casualty. ABYSMAL, abysmal, means extremely bad. The Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh, N.T. Rama Rao, kept a keen eye on the steel plant at Vizag. He once invited me to lunch at his Hyderabad house. His appetite was gargantuan. Gargantuan. Gargantuan means enormous. As a minister, I had a personal monthly quota of 1 million tons of steel, which I could allot to whom I pleased. This I surrendered. If I remember right, I set up a committee for disbursing it. With this, I went up in the esteem of the officials. The ubiquitous lobby of steel magnates too concluded that I was no pushover. Pushover. Pushover means a person who is easy to overcome or influence. On our return to Delhi, I resumed my desultory duties. Desultory. Desultory means without clear plan or purpose and showing little interest. Rescue, unknown to me, was waiting in the wings. This was one of those windfalls which ought to be always remembered. Waiting in the wings means ready to do something or ready to go to happen. Windfall means an unexpected gain of good fortune. Thank you for listening.